Thanks, that's the kind of enthusiasm. It'd be great for everything. Oh, Calvert, you can come up. Thanks for your patience, everybody. We're a little bit late getting here, among other things, because of some good things going on in the economy. We're just over at a welcoming luncheon for the Honolulu Festival, the 19th edition of the Honolulu Festival, which you know brings people from all over the Pacific Rim. It's very successful, and as a matter of fact, we were taking a few extra minutes because we're already planning the 20th. My point in mentioning that to you is, aside from, as I say, trying to account for why we're a few minutes in arrears on meeting you, is that across the board, we're pursuing our marketing strategies. We're encouraging economic activity that will benefit Hawaii. And so, with the advent of the what's called the sequester now, the configuration of legislation that causes a cutback in federal expenditures over the next 7 months, we wanted to make certain that everybody knows that we're not standing by passively in this. While we, of course, are very happy to have economic activity like the Honolulu Festival take place, we realize that there's going to be a ripple effect of this sequester. And I'm using that analogy of the ripple because obviously we're looking at the end of the month when the big wave will come, which is whether or not we have a budget that is authorized that will enable us to keep from actually shutting down the government. The sequester is not going to shut down government activity, either at the state or the county or the federal level, but it will have a ripple effect for individuals and groups, categories of employment throughout the federal government and by extension into the state and county and into those activities, including nonprofit groups that may have federal funding coming their way in the ordinary course of events. So we've been preparing for this day. If anything, I think we need to look at what the Honolulu Festival represents in terms of the expression of aloha that we have for everyone else coming to Hawaii, and try to remember that we need to extend that to each other as well. While many of us, if not the majority of us, might not be immediately affected by the sequester, at the advent of the sequester, our neighbors, our friends, family, individually may be affected. And so we need to be cognizant of that. We need to show them a lot of aloha. We need to be prepared to be of assistance to them. So we're going to be prepared to act accordingly with regard to any contingency that comes forward, depending on the category of activity that's affected and the individuals affected in it. We expect to hear from the federal agencies and departments over the upcoming days. We will be informed as to what their formulas are with regard to funding arrangements, including grants that might have to be reduced and on a time frame and a time schedule if they are. We're going to use this information as it arrives to determine what our strategies will be with regard to state programs. And in order to do this, I'm putting together a sequestration impact response team. The response team will be made up of public and private stakeholders. We are in the process, I think, of working through a very successful beginning on our energy task force. This will be a response team to accomplish just what I've been speaking about. We're going to be pulling together folks. We're in the process of confirming now whether they'll serve in business and government and nonprofits across the spectrum of economic and social activity in the state that's affected by the federal dollars. And they've obviously many people have been expressing their concern and their willingness, more importantly, to help with regard to whatever the outcome and impact is of the sequester. In that context, before the legislature right now, and as part of our budget proposal, we are indicating that we're setting aside, or would like the legislature to allow us to set aside $25 million as part of a contingency plan. That is to say, a dollar fund, a fund of dollars to be able to deal with any contingencies. And as Calbert Young, our Budget and Finance Director, will indicate in a moment, we are in the process of identifying perhaps a considerable sum more than the $25 million at this time. But of course, we're projecting that over a 2-year period. It's important for everybody to recognize that the sequester, as presently constituted, needs to be put into effect over a 7-month period. Now, that does not take into account the proposition or propositions that may be forthcoming in the Congress with regard to legislation to actually achieve a budget, or to extend current spending, or to address the question of the sequester after 7 months. In other words, quite a spectrum of legislative activity might take place. So our financial plan is proposing to the legislature that we accommodate up to $25 million for the next 2 years. Obviously, that can't take into account every possible avenue of expenditure and time frame associated with federal dollars, but we think that gives us at least a solid financial foundation to be able to direct our attention as we need towards the effect of the sequester and subsequent budget legislation on Hawaii. So last week, all state departments were ordered to begin assessing the areas which might be impacted, how the state funds what kind of state funds will be needed to continue services. We've had some practice with this, of course, as a result of the recession, when we had to come to grips with the provision of services without necessarily having as much in the way of personnel as we would like to have, and dollars available to the personnel we did have to be able to carry out their duties and obligations. So each department will proceed carefully. We're going to be assessing the situation as it unfolds, and we'll continue to stay in close contact, obviously, with all of the federal departments involved, obviously with our congressional delegation as well, and rest assured that our response team, when it's fully formulated, will be meeting and talking with one another and putting forward a game plan and a timetable as needed. And in order to perhaps assist you and the public with understanding a little bit more in the way of the projected financial implications of the sequester, I've asked Calbert Young, our Budget and Finance Director, to give a financial assessment at this point.
Okay, thank you, Governor. Well, today on the first day of the sequester, we wanted to lay out for you where we currently stand as a state government in terms of providing services and providing a means, a strategy to deal with any federal impact of sequestration on state programs. So to reiterate where we've prepared and where we've come from, the state of Hawaii has been prepared at the administrative level with a $25 million contingency revenue fund that was available should the need for those funds for sequester ever occur. Unfortunately, we know that that is now the case. So we will have to ask the legislature to access and deploy some of those funds as part of our next budget. Where we are today, though, is as of today, we still have yet to hear from federal departments and agencies on specific programs and specific dollar amounts that are going to be affected for state programs. Departments are trying to reach out to their federal counterparts to find out what programs are going to be affected, and then directors can therefore make the strategic plan in terms of asking which programs are going to be maintained and at what level. We think that this information will come from federal departments over the next week, and departments are compiling that information, and directors are thinking about which programs can be evaluated and fully funded. But make no mistake, it is not presumed that every program that loses federal funds will be able to be accommodated to maintain their current operational level. That is not an assumption of the $25 million contingency fund. Also, we have to bear in mind that the Council on Revenues, which is set to meet at their next quarterly meeting on March 13th, has yet to take into account any planned impact of sequestration at their last two meetings in terms of their current fiscal year forecast, as well as the next fiscal year forecast. When they meet on March 13th, we are hopeful that they will begin to quantify a formulaic impact on revenue projections for the next coming fiscal years, because that will be necessary for the legislature to ascertain whether or not the budget that they are currently working on will have enough revenues to support the budget proposals. Also, we want to bear in mind that the impact of the sequestration across the larger economy will impact far greater programs than just state programs. There are a number of nonprofit organizations and non-governmental entities that will see direct funding reductions as a result of federal program reductions. And the $25 million that I mentioned earlier will not, or is not intended to cover funding losses for those types of expenditures. But we will leave open the possibility, if there is the avenue for additional funds, or if our $25 million contingency fund can be stretched out further. And then, of course, there's the social impact to our overall society that we have to be very mindful of. Sequestration will likely impact everyday activities, whether it be going to the airport, law enforcement support, border protection, food security issues. So we have to bear in mind that all of those services and impacts are going to have some rippling effect eventually that's going to find its way back to taxpayers and state funding, and even at the county levels. So although this is an austerity measure that will likely save money for the federal government, we have to be very wary that all of those expenditures may eventually be pushed over or pushed down for funding supplantation to the states as well as to the local municipalities. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to the governor for any questions.
Yes.
Is it your sense that we will likely need more than 25 million? I know Calvert Butte mentioned possibly up to 40 earlier. I mean, what's your sense of that?
Go ahead, Calvert.
Our initial assessment back in September, and it continues today, is that just for state programs that are likely to lose federal funds, the impact to the states will be somewhere in the neighborhood of $25 to $35 million worth of federal funds. We have $25 million currently that's as a potential contingency fund, so that alone will signal to you that we do not have enough likely to cover every lost federal dollar.
Yeah, and part of the reason that we're let me put it this way: the number is arbitrary, but it's not capricious. It's arbitrary in the sense that there are a certain number of programs that can be assessed over a 7-month period, and certain percentages that are now in the air on the federal side that give us an educated guess as to what we at least have to take into account. What can't be taken into account right at the moment is continued economic activity, particularly where Hawaii is concerned. I think that there is going to be continued good activity, good results with regard to our hospitality industry. The expenditures with regard to civilian employees in the Department of Defense is subject to a whole lot of considerations and possible game plans and formulas right now. I met last night at length with the Pacific Command. with all of the services in the Pacific Command. We had a very extensive discussion with regard to the various possibilities. I was at the National Governors Conference, of course, this past weekend, and met within that conference a subsection of Council of Governors with regard to the National Guard issues facing the nation, and with particular reference to the Pentagon. We met with the Deputy Secretary of Defense and the Chair of the Department of Homeland Security as a Council of Governors. So I have a very strong and solid understanding, I think, of the implications as they ripple out, as they manifest themselves over time. What is crucial to this is understanding that over the next 30 days, a decision will have to be made in the Congress with regard to whether or not there will be an actual shutdown of the government by a failure to enact budget authorization, actual spending authorization for the national government. So if that takes place in some reasonable order, we'll have to recalculate what it is that the sequester might mean. So what we're asking people to do is to take a deep breath, understand that we are on this on a daily basis, that there will be individual instances in which there's going to be an adverse consequence, possible layoffs, possible furloughs. Layoffs, that may come down the line, but right now we're talking about furloughs at periodic time sequences. And what that means in terms of spending will simply have to come forward. The contingency we have, we think, meets a reasonable standard of preparedness that will enable us to deal with the consequences as they unfold.
Calvert, a little clarification on the $25 million. You said it's not for federal funding losses. There are some positions in the state which are partially federally funded, state funded. Does that mean the federal funding goes away, the position goes away, or is that too far in the weeds for you?
No, the $25 million is specifically to support state programs, and that includes positions that are associated with state programs for the portion that is the federal funds that will be lost. So in that particular scenario, that would be one acceptable ask from the department of trying to cover the lost federal portion with some additional state dollars to support that position.
So in other words, the state wouldn't save anything. If the federal money goes away, the state takes back the money. This way the state's going to put back what the federal government.
Yes, yes.
Well, and we have to remember, this doesn't mean necessarily that somebody's going to be fired or somebody's going to be laid off. They might have, considering the amount of money, say a particular department is told, on the federal side, is told that they have to make a 20% savings. And they determine that in order to do that, they have to lay off a certain number of personnel on a rotating basis, say 1 day every 2 weeks, maybe 2 days a month. That would be, and part of that affects a state employment because dollars may be associated with a state employee, as you just indicated. We'd have to calculate how that works. It's not as if we have to suddenly assume the entire salary necessarily of any individual state employee that has federal dollars as part of the equation when we determine where and how the payment comes for that person's hours or benefits. So that's what I'm saying. This it was a good question to say about how far down in the weeds do we get. We're prepared to start going down to individual conditions and circumstances. It's just that we don't know at any given point right now what those individual circumstances might be and what individuals might be impacted. As we discover it, as we learn who they are and what the consequences are over time, we'll react accordingly. That's why we want the contingency fund.
Are there any state projects, like construction projects, that could be impacted by this at this
The question is, are there any state projects or other projects that might be impacted? I'm going to have to range past the sequester as such a little bit here to answer that adequately. The situation with the sequester, the spending requirements over these next 7 months, if the sequester stands as it is today without modification, takes place in a context in which there is no budget. There is what's called a continuing resolution. We're operating under a resolution that reflects on previous year's budget authorizations. And so if the continuing resolution means, from a practical point of view, that you're allowed to spend money commensurate with the numbers that existed for the previous year to which the resolution refers. What that means is that anything you're dealing with now, or you might want to deal with now, say a repair of a ship or something of that nature, cannot be done because it didn't exist in the previous year's spending authorization. So it does affect future or contemporary contracts that otherwise might be called for in the budget projections that have been put forward to the Congress. But unless they actually pass a budget that discontinues the existing resolution, unless they actually pass a budget, we won't be able to put those projects into effect. It creates a very, very difficult situation going forward, because many of these projects and programs, if they don't get underway, are not simply going to be able to be snapped into existence if and when the Congress actually passes a budget. There are consequences to, say, not repairing a ship or re-outfitting a ship, because that ship may then have to be sent on to another port, and the time that was allotted originally for its servicing can't be funded. So this definitely affects contracts. It definitely affects programs, particularly as they are geared towards the immediate and near future, as far as the planning is concerned, whether it's the Department of Defense or whether it's the Department of Homeland Security or whatever department it is.
So, Governor, how would we put that in the context of rail?
I don't have a clue. I don't have a clue. You'll have to ask the Hart folks. We're certainly going to have them or ask them to be part of our response team. I suspect that contracts that are already encumbered have to be fulfilled. That's my understanding. Is that your understanding too, Kelber? If contracts already exist and they have been encumbered. Now, some contracts are out there, and if money hasn't been encumbered, then I think you have a real problem. I'm going to say educated guess with regard to the rail is that many of those contracts associated with the construction part of rail have been executed and are encumbered. But I can't account for that in detail. You'll have to ask the Hart folks. My guess is that a majority of the likely construction activity associated with rail over the next 7 months is in hand and is unlikely to be adversely affected. But I couldn't swear to that in terms of the question you asked.
Will it affect state contracts the same way then too that receive federal funding?
Yes.
Governor, right now, tourism is doing great, but is there a concern that we could see, let's say, fewer bookings down the road for the convention center because across the country people are a little nervous?
Well, that's all speculation and hypothetical, so I don't know. Other than just my experience today with regard to the Honolulu Festival, is the as our friends from around the Pacific Rim are expecting us to act rationally at some point and to actually have a budget and not continue to work ourselves over. I think they feel very optimistic about it. My own view, I've gone through one shutdown myself of real significance in the mid-1990s, and that turned out to be a complete disaster in political terms for the Republican Party of Mr. Gingrich at that time, and it affected the presidential election and congressional elections, and was addressed fairly quickly after it became a reality. So I'm going to take an optimistic point of view, and which I think is politically realistic, that that no one wants to be on the receiving end of the blame if stubborn clinging to this confrontational attitude continues in Washington. So I feel if we in the end, it's product that sells. In the end, it's what you have to offer, the quality of your product that is always at issue. Yes, price is an issue. Yes, economic circumstances, if they are dire, is an issue. But the economy has been coming back. I don't think anybody wants to see it recede again or go into recession again. And I'm going to operate on the basis that that common sense and the desire to preserve oneself politically is going to prevail, and that we'll be back on track sooner rather than later. And as a result, I think the quality of the product that Hawaii is in all regards, I'm using that in a generic way, whether it's hospitality, whether it's military spending, whether it's agriculture, whether it's education, higher education, and what it brings in terms of research and programs, any of those areas, I'm optimistic that Hawaii is going to continue to do very, very well.
Going back to state contracts, we just broke ground for a new National Guard headquarters.
Yes.
Is that up in the air also?
I don't believe so. Now, when it comes to, say, furnishing the facility when it's done, if those contracts haven't already been executed, then, and if the sequester was still in effect and the sequester reached that level of expenditure, say furniture and equipment, then it might be an issue. But that's a good example of the kind of contingency that we want to be prepared for, but something that I can't, with any kind of definitive statement right now, address. Oh, let me. I alluded to the Department of Defense in the meeting that we had yesterday, but I want to make a little bit clearer than I did. As I said, we've been in steady daily communication with the Pacific Command, and I can verify to you that there are about 19,000 civilian DoD employees here in Hawaii that expect to, if the present conditions do not alter in any way, shape, or form over the next 7 months, they'll be furloughed from April 21st to September 30th. So we've got some opportunity. We have some time here for sensible people to get together and resolve these issues in Washington, D.C. So the DoD will be issuing letters on March 19th to notify those who are in line for the furlough operations. They will not be furloughed, that is to say, taken off the job. It's going to be in a manner that I indicated, that a certain number of days a month, something of that nature. However, if that takes place starting in April, through September, there'll be approximately $138 million in pay that would have been part of the economy that will be adversely affected here in Hawaii. So you can see when I say that individuals may be affected in a ripple way, that affects your retail operations. That affects your discretionary expenditures. That affects whether you pay your bills on time. Those kinds of things. So I think you can, if $140 million, $138 million disappears between April and September, it's not all going to happen on April 21st, but if that all goes through and there's no resolution of the issue, that means just for the federal employees that are impacted, there will be a decrease, obviously, in discretionary spending between April and September, and then we have to determine what happens after December. So I think it'll affect local business. It'll obviously affect donations to charities and those who are supporting nonprofit organizations that they are partial to. It may even affect school enrollment, for example, whether people feel they have to leave the state or perhaps move somewhere else out of a particular school district in order to meet their financial obligations. So I do want to emphasize that among the institutions, groups, and individuals we've been talking with, we've been talking to the financial institutions. And I think I can say without a contradiction that the financial industry in Hawaii is sensitive to these issues and will be responsive to conditions and circumstances that affect people adversely, perhaps with mortgages, perhaps with other obligations and loans and so on that they have. I'm not saying they're going to be forgiven or that they're going to be ignored or set to the side, but everybody understands that there is liable to be some very difficult times ahead for individuals and groups, and we're all going to try and pull together. I began this conference by saying we extend aloha to all of our visitors when they come. We need to extend a little to ourselves and to remind ourselves of who we are and what makes this place called Hawaii so special, and it means our regard for each other, an atmosphere of kindness and goodness and courtesy to one another, and I think we can count on our financial institutions to extend that aloha spirit whenever and wherever and to the degree that it can. I hope before the end of the week. Yes, the end of next week. But we can add, there's nothing sacred about this list of people. We'll go in those areas and ask those groups and individuals to participate as it seems useful. Well, from the government, obviously, I have to include all my departments. I'm going to make Calbert the chair. I need somebody to blame, and no. Let's not go too far. Let's not, There's always a smart remark in the audience, isn't there, like that? These are who I'm recommending. Obviously, all of our departments, and I'll obviously recommend that we ask the congressional delegation to keep us informed, and the Pacific Command, the Council of Revenues, the Association of Counties. In other words, those entities that have official responsibility, jurisdiction, and obligation to be involved with federal dollars and their expenditure or their assignment. We have to have that. Everybody will be on board. I'm certain. And obviously, we're going to ask the Business Roundtable and the Bankers Association and the building trades and some of the there are organized groups of nonprofits. In other words, there's associations of nonprofits. We'll ask those folks to work with us as well. It's not like we're going to have every organization in the state, but we need to have representative individuals from the various sectors that are going to be affected by the federal dollar crisis. Well, I think the situation speaks for itself. I just finished speaking about our sense of aloha for each other, and sometimes we get reminded how important that is and that we should never take it for granted. So I think that situation is being thoroughly vetted, certainly in the House, and as I say many, many times, our diversity defines us rather than divides us, and that's something we all need to keep in mind. Thank you very much.